So I want to look at difficult conversations with you. So when conversations get more difficult, so whether that be a client or whether that be with, for those of you that lead teams, when you speak to people in the team. For those of you that even don't lead teams but are in part of one, when you know you've got to have a conversation, maybe with your team leader, your supervisor, or just another colleague. So when you look at leadership models and motivation models, when you look on the internet, there are hundreds and hundreds of them out there, aren't there? Yeah, the one in the middle is my favourite. Because if you spent your day and sat in your office working your way around that, you'd never get any bloody work done, would you? But what have they all got in common? They're about people. They're about understanding people. The problem that I feel with some of these is that they put people in boxes. Yeah? Because if you've got only a small team and one of your team's identified as the completer finisher, well, what happens if you need them to start something? Because it's only a small team. You've got to understand how to motivate people. Yeah? So this is rapport. Rapport's up and down. Don't be afraid of saying something that, in my way, we refer to it as being burnt, where you say something and it doesn't go down well with the other person and they come back at you verbally. Okay? You're going to say things. You're going to say things in a conversation that don't go down well, certainly in a difficult conversation. But then you'll say something that they quite like, that ticks one of the buttons. And then you're going up. You'll jump up. You'll get up that trust stairway, getting towards it. Then you'll say something else, and you'll slide back down again. There is no such thing as a fantastic negotiator. There are good negotiators that know how to get themselves out of trouble. Because we all say things wrong at times. We all say the wrong thing when we're testing what we think is going on. It's not about not making mistakes, it's about how well you recover from those mistakes. So don't be afraid of rapport going up and down. It's completely natural. All of those of you in relationships, in long-term relationships, even the best relationships, up and down. Yeah? You can walk in one day and think, shit, what have I done? Yeah? But the thing with trust is, once it's gone, it's gone. You're not getting it back. Relationships don't break down because of affairs, they break down because of a lack of trust. Once it's gone, you're not getting it back. So once you've got there, you've got to work bloody hard to keep it. And if you've got a difficult message to give the difficult message. Think about how you're going to package it, which we're going to look at, how you plan around it. But you can't start telling lies to people. Even little lies. What about lies? A white lie's okay? A little lie's okay. It's interesting, isn't it? Because some people will be sat there now thinking, well, the little one's all right. Not too bad, it's not going to hurt anybody. If you tell a lie and it suddenly comes out, even 3-4 weeks down the line, a month down the line, it's still going to resonate. They lied to me about that. Can't trust them. Passing a difficult message takes planning, but you've got to be honest with people. People would rather hear the truth and be able to deal with it than be sugar-coated and told a lie. Yeah, and then find out. You've got to get into the habit of planning around a difficult conversation and delivering the message honestly. If you get yourselves emotionally worked up, whether that's through anxiety, through being stood, waiting to go and speak to someone and it starts to build up in you, you will leak. Yeah? And when I say you will leak, what I mean is your tone will change, your delivery will change, the way you clip on a certain word in a sentence, the little bit of frustration comes out in a syllable in a word. And do you know what? We're brilliant at hearing it. We are fantastic at hearing it. And that little voice in your head says, they're pissed off with me. And then you start to listen from a negative perspective. We covered the listening styles in the first session. We listen in 6 different ways for those of you that weren't here. So it changes your listening to a combative listening mode, and you start to listen negatively. And once you start to listen negatively, you start to hear all the negativity. You start to hear all the confrontation. And then we get in a... Who's been in a meeting or gone to a meeting where you've been going there thinking, this is going to be a tough meeting. This is going to... Yeah. And did it turn out to be one? Yeah. Because you're listening for it. The other person... I was doing some one-to-ones yesterday with a group of guys, and one of them said, it demonstrated perfectly. I'd not heard any... Because he'd wound me up, I didn't hear anything. He was being quite conciliatory, as it turned out. But I didn't hear any of that, because I was ready for an argument. I'd gone there ready. You have to... The most important thing that we say to negotiators is this: you have to understand yourself. And it's hard work and uncomfortable to hold a mirror up to yourself and look at what your failings are, what your weaknesses are, what it is that winds you up. But you have to do it. You have to understand who you are and what pushes your buttons. Because if you don't recognise when someone's pushing them till it's too late. You're still going to get your buttons pushed, but you can catch yourself earlier before you start to damage the relationship. So when you look at this, let's go back to our broken promises around the missed deadline. Okay? What the studies show us is this, is that when an event happens, whatever that event, so the missed deadline, the client, the person, whoever it is, will have a thought process around that event. From that thought process, it will affect their emotions, and emotions drive behaviour. Been and speaking to people who've got to the point where they're going to take their own life. And when you get talking to them, it could be something really minor when you look from the outside. When you look from the outside, you can think, really? Your cat died? I don't do cats. But for them, it's huge. And that, because of how emotional they are, that rational behaviour completely drops off. Now bring this back to your client who's got a missed deadline and has got all weekend to think about it and get themselves angry about it, because actually it impacts hugely on them, because on the back of what you've said, they've made promises to their supervisors, their bosses, and you don't know that relationship, or you may not know that relationship. So by the time it comes to that Monday morning and they've completely worked themselves up, their behaviour is going to be off the scale. Yeah? They're going to say things, they're going to be angry, and they're going to say things they wouldn't normally say. The best example of this I can give you is, I mentioned it when I introduced myself the first time. I had a trigger event in my life around moving on and developing myself, and that was being held at gunpoint. I got held at gunpoint, shot at the back of my head, being told I was going to get my head blown off. Okay, as you'd imagine, traumatic. On the night that happened, there was a particular guy called Jack, who was a really experienced cop and a real kind of guru around understanding people. He was fantastic. And as I got picked up by a patrol after and taken to a rendezvous point while the whole area was searched for this guy with a gun, Jack came over, and I'd taken my utility belt off. Part of that was around sort of de-escalating the situation and not being a threat to him. Jack came over and he put his arm around me. And as soon as I felt him touch me, I could feel myself go. So I just knocked his arm away. And he was astute enough to think, okay, I'll leave that. I went back to the police station, and we all got taken back to the police station while the area was searched by armed officers. Sat in a canteen. Jack came in and he sat across the table from me. Never said a word. As all the patrols get called in, everyone migrates to the canteen where they know I am and the other young lad that was with me. Jack comes in, sits opposite me. Everybody comes in. And without exception, the conversation was kind of like this. God, I don't know, I'd have to leave the job. I couldn't go back out on the street after that. What about your wife? What about your kids? Your kids are only young. They could have been orphaned. I'd have to leave. I couldn't carry on. I'm not sure even I can carry on after this is what's happened. Don't know how you're going to carry on. And the mood went down and down and down. Really affected my thought process into a negative thought process. Jack. This is kind of a cop humour thing. Jack sat opposite me when everyone had finished. And I was kind of, it had all drifted into just noise behind me, all negativity. Jack looked at me from across the table and he said, Kev. As I looked at him, he went, bang! He said, you wouldn't have felt a thing, mate. You'd have took your head right off. And I started laughing. It changed my thought process. Right at the early stage, he took me out of that negativity, got me laughing. And he sat there and he said, you're safe. You're back with your mates. It's over. And that was a thing that I kind of kept hold of, to the point that when the commander came, because the commander came as a major investigation now that these 2 police officers have been held hostage, the commander came, and to this day I'm convinced it's written in his day book. He got his policy book out straight away, made some notes, sat down opposite me and said, right, before we start, anything you need? And I said, clean underwear. And I saw it and I'm thinking, he's written it down. He looked at me as if to say, you dickhead. But the reason I mention that is, it got my emotions under control. Yeah, and the behaviour that it changed for me was the fact that I became driven in what I was doing. Had Jack not been there, I would have left completely negative. How often do you summarise? Those of you who do meetings, how often do you summarise? At the end? All the time? Yeah. So why do we summarise all the time? Say again, sorry? Brilliant. Because for those of you that think, oh, you only summarise at the end, because it's a summary, yeah. Well, if at 10 minutes in, you've misinterpreted something, and you go off down the wrong tangent, you can get to the end of the meeting and summarise, and the person sits there thinking, that ain't what I meant. But because they don't do confrontation, they don't tell you, and they walk out of the meeting thinking, I've no idea what that was about. And then you're surprised when nothing happens. Summarise all the way through. Absolutely. Summaries are brilliant. Summaries allow you to steer the conversation as well. Okay? It allows you to take control of the conversation. Because quite often in meetings, in any conversation, how many times have you spoken to someone about something and they've gone off over there and started talking about something completely different and you're thinking, do you know what? I've got 15 minutes left. I need to get this back on track. Summaries are the way to do it. Because you do it non-judgmentally. It's not confrontational. Yeah. It's not saying, yeah, hang on a minute, we weren't talking about that, we're talking about this. Because now they've gone, all right, I'm not interested then, am I not? Barriers are coming up again. So a summary allows you to gain control. The line that I always used was, because then I'm taking responsibility if I've got it wrong. Yeah. Let me just make sure I've got this right in my head. What you've said so far is, and the end of the summary is where you want to take the conversation next. What you've said so far is before we were talking about what's your feelings on that. It allows you to steer it, to gain control of it and get it back on track where you need it to be. Okay? So the more you summarise, the more control you keep over it. It also allows you to make it inclusive. And what I mean by that is the way we work is this. If we haven't spoken we'll be sat nice and quiet, when we want to say something, we have to take a breath. We can't just sit there and go, can I just ask a question? You go and take the breath in. For those of you who chair meetings or run meetings within your teams, watch the participants in the meeting. Because if you've got someone who's quite quiet, they will sit there and you can see them go, and then one of the more verbal members of the team dives in. And the quiet person goes, and as it goes on again, they go, someone else dives in and you get, and they're not included in the meeting. If you clock that, what you need to do is summarise and then draw them in. But if I turn around and say, Lisa, did you want to say something? What's the likely response from someone who's a bit quiet? No, fine. Whereas if I say, Lisa, what were your feelings on that? And I would always say feelings as opposed to think. All right, get the emotion out certainly from my world. I don't want to know the cognitive stuff at the moment. I want to know what the emotions are. But however you want to term it, what do you think about that? How do you feel about that? Because now Lisa's not got a choice but to respond. Making it a closed yes or have you got something to say? No. No. Think about how you're going to include them. Watch the people breathing, the breathing pattern. Who uses but? Everybody uses but, I suppose. You ever thought about what but means? But means you're talking shit. That's what it means. When someone comes up with a great idea and you say, yeah, I've heard what you've said, but you're wrong, is what you're saying. But is a no-no. Try and avoid using but, certainly in that context. Yeah? I've come up with a great idea, and someone's really invested a lot of time in thinking about this, and they come in and they deliver it all full of energy and excitement, and you say, yeah, it's a good idea, but... Great, thanks very much for that. Agree before disagreeing. Someone might come in with the most outlandish idea in the world. They've only come to you because they believe it's a good idea. So no matter how ridiculous it is, you've got to acknowledge the fact that they think it's a good idea. No one's going to come into your office, are they? Those of you that run the teams, no one's going to come in and say, I've had a really shit idea that I think we should go with. They're not, are they? They're going to come in with, I've been thinking about this, yeah, and I've come up with a suggestion for it. You've got to acknowledge it if you're going to keep them motivated and build that team. You can't just discount it with a but. If it is a most outlandish idea, and you know what, this is never going to work, you can say, you've put a lot of thought into that, and I can see why you think that that's going to work. Have you considered this? Because quite often when people get blinkered on that idea, they don't look at the strategic impact of it going forward to other departments, other areas of business. So at that point, you can say, you know what, you could really put a lot of thought into that, and I can see why you've brought it to me as a great idea. Have you considered, now we're going to let them down slowly, rather than the, but, get out of my office. All right? I'll bring these guys up. Ronaldo, Lewis Hamilton, and the guys from the SAS. Those of you who came have seen this before. Communication is a skill. It is a skill like anything else. You have to practice it. These guys do not turn up. Lewis Hamilton doesn't turn up on a Saturday for practice and say, chuck us the keys. Yeah? I don't think they have keys, but you know what I mean. He practices and practices. Yeah? People say, oh, he's got a lot of natural talent. You think he just fannies about for in-between matches? Or practices and practices to stay as good as he gets? These guys absolutely practice and practice to be at their best. Like we said before around finding the, planning the conversation, they practice to be excellent. That is the term used. We practice to be excellent, so when the pressure's on, we are at least good. If you don't practice to be excellent, if you don't plan your conversations to be excellent, when the pressure's on, you ain't going to be good. You'll be lucky if you're average. And that's when it starts to cause you problems.